Welcome, everybody. Up to you whether or not you meditate with your mask on. You are appropriately social distanced. If you're at home alone, you don't need to wear your mask. But you can if you want to, if it's super cool. I want to welcome everybody to our regular Monday night Against the Stream meditation class. And as a follow-up on last week's talk and discussion and practice about the importance of the intention that we set for our practice. And I talked last week about Ajahn Amaro's pretty strong statements about if we're not bringing a loving kindness, an attitude of radical acceptance and friendliness and kindness to our mindfulness practice, that actually mindfulness won't work. That it's a necessity to bring friendliness. It's a necessity to bring kindness and compassion and to our internal investigation that will lead to the liberating insights, that will lead to the breakthroughs that we're seeking, to see clearly, to respond more wisely. But from this foundation of over and over redirecting our attitude and our intentions, our aspiration to kindness. Kindness towards our own minds, towards our own bodies, kindness towards this often painful existence that we have. So we'll start with a period of meditation, and I invite you to find a posture that's upright, relaxed, and to establish your own aspiration, intention, attitude of kindness, of friendliness, of accepting ourselves just as we are, as we train the heart and the mind to see more clearly. Allowing our eyes to be closed gently, making any adjustments necessary so that the body is upright, but also relaxed, not too tense, not too rigid or stiff, but that the flesh of the body, the musculature, is hanging loosely around the skeleton. We bring mindfulness into the present time experience of being. You can investigate your present being, consciousness that receives sound and sight, smell and taste, thoughts and emotions and sensations. And we generally spend the first few minutes gathering the attention on a simple object like the breath, letting everything else be in the background, not trying to stop our minds from thinking, but trying to stop indulging in thoughts or engaging in planning or remembering. The mind will continue to think, but we can choose to bring our awareness to the body. Contact with the chair or cushion or couch or bed, wherever you may be lounging. This body breathes all by itself, and we can just bring attention, mindfulness, to the sensations that the breath creates. No need to control the breath or manipulate it or breathe any certain way. Just pay attention to how your body naturally breathes. And what sensations does the breath create at the nostrils or chest, or belly? Of course, our attention doesn't stay with the breath. So the effort is to redirect, to return, disengage from the thinking mind, come back into the body. Breathing in, know that you're breathing in. Breathing out, know that you're breathing out. Let everything else fade to the back, keeping the body sensations, posture, breath as the foreground, the focus. Beginning to expand from this narrow focus on mindfulness of the breath to a more inclusive, embodied, present time awareness of the other senses, sense doors, sounds, both internal and external. Any experience of smell, taste, seeing. All of the other sensations being experienced in the body, from head to toe. Emotions, thoughts arising and passing, breath coming and going. Make room for your whole experience, this human condition of thinking and feeling. And the consciousness, the intentional investigative awareness, this ability that we have to observe our own minds, to receive what's happening moment to moment in the heart, in the body. With an attitude of friendliness, non-judgmental, kind, present time awareness. We can begin to identify not only what's happening in the mind or the body, but also the feeling tone of those thoughts. Some thoughts that arise in the mind are quite pleasant. Some thoughts quite unpleasant. Likewise, physically in this body, some sensations perceived as pleasant, some experienced as painful, hard to bear. And some of our experience is neutral, just sounds arising and passing, just thoughts floating through the spacious mind, just sensations being felt in the body, in the heart. The second foundation of mindfulness: what is pleasant, what is unpleasant, what is neutral, your own direct experience moment to moment. Remember our shared intention to bring kindness, friendliness, acceptance to ourselves just as we are, as we investigate what we're experiencing, how it feels, as we're learning to respond more wisely with more compassion to our pain, to the pain of others, with non-attachment to the impermanent, pleasant experiences that arise and pass. What if you let go of the past for a moment? Who would you be? What if you let go of all of your plans, your hopes and dreams? What if we let go of needing to be any different than we are in this moment? Extending loving kindness in all directions. May all beings experience happiness. May all beings experience ease. May all beings experience freedom from suffering. So, I want to talk about, freedom, transformation, awakening, the fact that we have a map of how to traverse, how to navigate our way through this human experience. And that we have not only a detailed description of what to do, called the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, called the Dharma. We also have the ability. We not only have the directions, we also have the ability to apply them and to go on this journey of awakening that we call the middle path, and that there is there's actually a destination. We're doing this for a reason. We're not just meditating just for fun. Most people don't find meditation to be all that fun. Some people do, but most of the people that think that meditation is really fun probably aren't doing it right. But that's okay. No judgment. So funny, right? Anytime somebody says no judgment, it's totally like dismissing that we're completely judging. No judgment. You're like, of course we're judging. Partially, I'm thinking about this because I've been reading some and hanging out with this book that I'm going to do this course on, and I gave the talk on last week. It's called The Breakthrough. My teacher, Ajahn Amaro, it's a transcript, a book, teachings from a retreat that he taught, that they recorded all of the meditation instructions and all the Dharma talks and all of it, and then edited it and turned it into a book. And it's called The Breakthrough. And The Breakthrough is a reference to, it's a translation of teaching from the Buddha, where he says, we start this path, we start this Four Noble Truths practice, this Eightfold Path practice, this meditation practice, because we want to, get free. We feel we're suffering, we feel stuck, we feel not as free as we could be, not as happy, not as at ease. And then at some point you apply these, you say, okay, here's the map. Okay. Understanding and intention. Okay. Let me try to get my mind around understanding reality and what are my intentions. And okay. Speech and action and livelihood. And you start to look at that and be like, okay, some renunciation. I should stop lying and stealing, and I should be more honest, and I should be more careful with my speech, and I should pay attention to my relationship to money and how I earn money. And you start to get the lay of the land. You hear the Eightfold Path, and you say, okay, meditation, there's effort, there's mindfulness, concentration. You start to practice it, and everybody has a different experience. I think I talked about this a couple of weeks ago around or maybe it was last week, where sometimes you start meditating and have a very, wonderful experience and a lot of insights early on, and you kind of start to like, wow, this is mindfulness is a miracle. This is amazing. I didn't know I could actually pay attention. I didn't know I could actually redirect my attention back to my body rather than staying stuck in my mind. And so sometimes early on we have some very important and transformative experiences. And sometimes, people say like, I don't know, I'm doing it because I feel like it's my only hope, but I'm not sure if it's working at all. I just have a loud mind and an uncomfortable body, and, I sort of feel like a failure, but I keep doing it because I'm pretty sure that everything else is a dead end. So maybe this will work. I'll keep trying. I'm not getting it right away. So the breakthrough is the Buddha referring to the first level of awakening. He says there's 4, as we follow this path and we embody the Eightfold Path and the, really see more and more clearly the cause of our suffering is our clinging and our aversion and our misidentification with the mind, the body, as self. He says there'll be 4 different levels, but the first level is where you break through. Like I was doing it, and it was working a little bit, and I was suffering a little bit later. And then there's this breakthrough where, from this perspective, there's no turning back. When you've reached this first level, liberation is guaranteed. If you've reached this first, if you've broken through, not necessarily in this lifetime, but what it said is that it's called entering the stream. So, I've been flying this against the stream flag for decades now. Also a teaching of the Buddha, Patiso Tagami, the path to liberation goes against the stream. And this isn't really, I'm sort of making this fit. It doesn't really come this way in the Buddha's teachings, but we could say in order to really go against the stream, first you have to get in it. You have to enter the stream. You can't go against the stream from the shore, and part of that is like, all of, is like practicing Buddhism by just reading about it, where you're sort of like a voyeur of Buddhism, kind of like intellectualizing it, reading about it, sort of, and that actually entering the practice, the Eightfold Path, get, one foot in front of the other, walking the middle path through applying, through living the 5 precepts, through living as mindfully, both in a formal meditation practice and informally trying to bring present time awareness, kindness, compassion into our lives. Actually practicing, not just thinking about it, not just believing that's a good idea, but actually applying it. So this stream entry, the Buddha says we don't actually enter the stream until we've practiced deeply enough, seen clearly enough to break the first 3 fetters. And so I'll talk about that tonight, breaking the fetter, and I like this word fetter. It's I feel like it's not used that much. When was the last time you used fetter in a non-Buddhist context? And maybe if you're like, in a dungeon or something, or it's like a handcuff. It's a ball and chain, to be fettered, to be locked, to be tethered to something. But fetter itself, really, for me, it has this image of like metal, like your, fetters are like handcuffs, basically, like you're chained. And he says, there's all of these different ways that we're chained to our suffering. But that also the Dharma is the key to unlock these ways that we're locked up, that we're tethered, that we're cuffed to our suffering, to unhappiness. So I'll share, we'll discuss that tonight. I'll read a little bit out of Ajahn Amaro and Ajahn Pasano's Anthology of the Buddha's teachings on Nibbana, on liberation. It's called The Island. I don't know, I'm on a Theravadan monastic lineage kick right now. We were doing Ajahn Chah this year and Ajahn Amaro now. And this book, all of these books are available for free. Abhayagiri. Like last week I was saying Amaravati, but Amaravati is the monastery in England, and you can't get them to ship you books right now, but you can get Abhayagiri. I think they're still shipping books during the pandemic. It's the monastery in Northern California. And these are all not, you won't find these books in bookstores, only from the monastery, only their free distribution from the monastery. So this is Ajahn Amaro and Ajahn Pasano's translation of some of the key suttas, original teachings of the Buddha on liberation. Sotapanna, the spiritual turning point, entering the stream. Bhikkhus. Bhikkhus is the word for monastics. It means that this lecture, this Dharma talk, was given to some monks, and he's addressing the monastics. It says, Bhikkhus, suppose there were a man with a lifespan of 100 years who could live 100 years. Someone would say to him, come, good man, in the morning they will strike you with 100 spears. At noon, they will strike you with 100 spears. In the evening, they will strike you with 100 spears. And you, good man, being struck day after day by 300 spears, will have a lifespan of 100 years, will live 100 years. And then, after 100 years have passed, you will make the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths to which you had not broken through earlier. Make sense? You're going to live 100 years, but every day you're going to be shot with 300 spears, and then you'll make the breakthrough. It goes on to say, it is fitting for a clansman intent on his good to accept the offer. For what reason? Because this samsara is without discoverable beginning. Samsara is literally translated as something like this realm that we're in, and it's a realm of perpetual, beginningless wandering through incarnation after incarnation. And every incarnation, you experience a lot of suffering. You also experience a lot of joy. We're not going to dismiss that life is also beautiful and pleasant and filled with a whole bunch of fun things that we like to do, but it entails suffering as part of it. So wandering through lifetime after lifetime in samsara. Because this samsara is without a discoverable beginning, we can't track back, like, when did I start this process? When did my karma start? A first point cannot be discerned of blows by spears, blows by swords, blows by axes. And even though this may be so, bhikkhus, I do not say that the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths is accompanied by suffering or displeasure. So do you follow this? He's saying, if you had this opportunity to say, okay, 100 years of all of this, and then you'll break through. And because we've been doing this maybe for incarnations, I don't know if you that makes sense to you or not. I'm a little agnostic on the whole rebirth, but I lean a little bit more towards faith than dismissing it. Again, I do not say that the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths is accompanied by suffering or displeasure. Rather, the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths is accompanied only by happiness and joy. So this is the kind of the sales pitch. If you do this, if you embody kindness and compassion and mindfulness and live with integrity and an ethical way of speaking and an ethical way of acting and a sober mind, the outcome will be happiness and joy. Breakthrough of the Four Noble Truths is equated to entering the stream. Like really, as I said before, you learn this stuff and you're kind of on the surface of like, okay, I'm learning mindfulness. I'm considering living by the 5 precepts, and that the breakthrough is when you're actually really, really doing it, not thinking about it, but really applying it. So what are so there's 4 levels of awakening: the stream enterer, the once returner, the non-returner, and the arahant. These are the 4 levels of awakening in the map of Theravadan Buddhism. This is what is taught. This is what is believed. And each level of experience is attained by breaking the fetters. So I'll share with you what these fetters are. There are these 5 lower fetters, and they are identity view, doubt, and distorted grasp of rules and vows, sensual desire, ill will. So the 5 lower fetters, and then there's 5 higher fetters. And they are lust for form, lust for the formless, conceit, restlessness, ignorance. These are the 5 higher fetters. In order to become a stream enterer, in order to fully enter the stream, it's the first 3 fetters that are broken. The non-returner is all 5 of those first, what are called the lower fetters. The once returner is, I think the once returner is not all 10. It must be like 8 or something like that. And then the arahant breaks all 10. When you're free from identity view, doubt, a distorted grasp of rules and vows, sensual desire, ill will, lust for form, lust for the formless, conceit, restlessness, and ignorance, then you experience full liberation. That's the full arahant, the fully awakened being in this lifetime. So for tonight, let's just look at these first 3. Identity view, doubt, and the distorted grasp of rules and vows. The Pali name for identity view is Sakaya Ditti, which is believing that you are your personality. So I want to ask you all, the handful of people in the room here with me, everyone at home, to reflect for a moment on your personality, your identity. What do you, who are you? How do you, when you think about yourself, as you do most of the time, as we all do most of the time, we think about ourselves. How do you think about yourself? What do you identify with? What is this sort of like, when you complete the sentence, I am what? What are the things? Of course, there's the obvious things like around gender or maybe age or, I'm young, I'm old, I'm this race, I'm this gender, I'm this, but more like the kind of, and maybe that's a big part of your identity. But also, like, what about your personality? How do you identify yourself? What kind of personality do you have, and how personally do you take it? I am shy. I'm an introvert. That's who I am. I am an extrovert. I'm funny. I'm anxious. That's who I am. Like I walk through the world thinking of myself as like I'm anxious, or I'm. What are some of the other things that you identify with? How about like? So the Buddha said there's 3 personality types. Do you know your Buddhist personality type? Have you diagnosed yourself? Many of you that have been listening to me or studying Buddhism with other people have heard this and done this. And so the Buddha says, all of Buddhism is the core problem is some form of greed, which is everywhere from attachment to craving to lust to addiction. That's all under the banner of greed. And then there's hatred, which is from the subtle annoyances to aversion to anger to ill will to hatred to murderous rage. All of also being easily annoyed is hatred, is aversion. And even though maybe you don't think, I don't want to kill anybody, but I'm just often annoyed with people. That's also hatred from this perspective. Or delusion. And delusion is harder to identify because by its very definition, when you're deluded, you don't know it. You're in a delusion about your delusions. And so it's a little harder. It's harder to talk about. It's harder to identify. And from the Buddhist perspective, some of the delusions are just about this thing, like deluded into believing that you are permanent self, that your personality is your identity, that, this sort of clinging to I, me, mine, self-centeredness. In recovery, there's this saying that, so many addicts, alcoholics, whatever, have this low self-esteem, this sort of like, I am this tiny piece of unworthy shit that the whole universe revolves around. I'm unworthy, but it's all about me all of the time. And that's a delusion. So if you have that kind of self-centeredness and you're taking everything personal and you think everything's about you, if you think this Dharma talk is about you, you're delusional. It's about humans, all humans. It's not so personal. So the Buddha says you can diagnose yourself with a personality, a Buddhist personality type. And one of the classic ways to do that is to imagine, and you do this a lot, you walk into a new environment, a new room. Or maybe like think about If you've been to the meditation center, you can think about the first time that you came here. If you're here for the first time tonight, I think most of you have been here before. But think about like walking into a new space. What do you notice first about a new space? When you enter a new environment, what does your mind do? What is your personality tendency when you walk into a new space? And so let's, for this, meditative, like say you're walking into a meditation center. Do you first notice what's wrong? First check out, like, are the chairs, do they look comfortable or uncomfortable? How about the cushions? Like, how's the art? Is there cool art? Does it look like a spiritual place? Do you first notice like a kind of judging and what would be called an aversive tendency? Like, what's wrong? First looking for like, what's wrong with this place? Where's the exits? Are there ample exits? Where am I going to sit so that I feel safe or Or do you first notice, you walk into a meditation center, what you like? Oh, I first notice what I like. Oh, I like the art or the Buddha image, or I like the carpets, or I like the meditation cushions, or and those are cool meditation cushions, and I want one. These, often if you're the first example is an aversive, a hatred personality. First, you're looking for what's wrong with this situation. What don't I like about this room? And then maybe even think about changing it. Maybe I'll tell Noah how he could make this place better. This, let me give him some notes. Or the greed type, the desire type that comes in is like, I like it, I want it. Who's the artist? Where'd you get those prints? I want those. Where'd you get those cushions? I need one for my house. Is that a Balinese bench you're sitting on? Those are killer. I want one. And so it's that desire, greed, and that if you're that type, you just walk through your life wanting, seeing what you like, and maybe a bit positive and optimistic, but a lot of desire, maybe a lot of shopping, maybe a lot of, and maybe you don't even follow through on it, but you're always wanting stuff. Of course, we all have our judgments and we all have our desires. These are so broad human experiences. Now, the delusional type walks into a room and maybe doesn't even notice the art or the carpets or the meditation cushions or the Balinesian bench or the exits, and maybe is a little kind of like, until I just pointed it out, was like not so focused on the material, was thinking about themselves, or stuck in some other la la land or plan or memory, or thinking about how the world revolves around them. It wasn't so focused on what was going on in the space. It's kind of, so you can identify, identity view. Maybe oh, I'm a greed type, or I'm an aversive type, or I'm a delusional type. Now, I'll quickly, the talk's not really about this, but there is a positive from this Buddhist perspective. If you're a greed type, you have a lot of faith usually. And if you take that desire and you turn it towards liberation, there's this feeling of confidence that can come, this feeling of, I want freedom and I'm willing to work for it and I'm going to get free. So there's a positive on that greed personality tendency. I want nirvana and I'm going to work for it. And if you're aversive and often judgmental and critical, and there's a positive side of that, which is that you're right a lot of the time. What you're pointing out as wrong with this world It's true. There's a lot wrong with this world. There's a, and you walk into the room and you're like, yeah, that carpet is disgusting. It's not just a judgment. It's a discernment. Aversive types tend towards discerning wisdom. And also turn that aversion for suffering to the Dharma and be like, I don't want to suffer anymore, so I'm going to practice hard because I'm tired of wandering endlessly and being stabbed with all of those arrows that the Buddha's talking about. So I'm going to practice the 5 precepts. I'm going to practice the 4 foundations of mindfulness. I'm going to do this work because I'm tired of suffering. Sucks. Not necessarily greed for the goal, but aversion to what's happening as the motivation. The deluded personality type is quick to equanimity because they're not constantly being driven by the material craving or the aversive hating. There's, with applying the meditation, doesn't have so much of that clinging and aversion, and is going to be able to see, oh, my mind is just self-centered, but that's not who I am. And there's going to be more and more equanimity. And so that's the positive side. Identity, the fetter of clinging to our identities. I was also thinking about like how many people walk around being identified with like their astrological sign. Well, I'm just like this because I'm a Leo, or I'm just like this because I'm an Aquarius, or I'm just like this because I'm a, fill in the blank. And maybe there's some truth to some of those broad generalizations and specific tendencies of astrological types, but how much do you take that on as your identity? I was listening to some attachment theory, relational attachment theory stuff this weekend. And this kind of like encouragement to like identify yourself as this, fearful avoidant, or this, resolved or unresolved, or he was breaking it down. He was breaking people in relationships down into 3 categories. You're either an island, a wave, or an anchor. And this encouragement to like kind of take that on. And then, which there's actually a lot of wisdom to, I think, to some of the attachment theory stuff, but it's just how much do you believe it? You can see like, oh yeah, that's kind of how my mind works. I was with a friend listening to this and they were like, oh yeah, like that's dead on. That's how my mind works. Like I'm an island. That's just like, that's totally my personality, or I'm a wave, or I'm an anchor. Like that's just, and you can see it. And so sometimes astrology or, the Enneagram, or I'm a 7, or I'm an 8, or I'm all of these different ways that we identify ourselves. Sometimes they're useful if you don't take them on as yourself of who I am. And this is what the Buddha is talking about here. He said, this first level of freedom, you have to stop believing that you're your personality tendencies, because it's not who you are. That's just conditioned by, some of the conditions in your life, maybe your karma from past lives, but it's not the self. It's not your true identity. And as long as you're misidentified with your shyness or your greediness or your aversive negativity, and as long as you're taking that person, you're going to suffer so much. And part of what's going to happen in the freedom from suffering is your personality not going to change much. That's the bad news for all of us. Freedom doesn't change the personality that much, but it changes how much we take it personally, how much we believe that's who I am. Does that make sense? So that's the first fetter, Sakyaya deity, breaking free from that belief in all of these things that we take on of that's who I am, and start to just wake up to, I'm a process unfolding, and I have this personality that I need to deal with, and that I see the world through, and that I communicate the world through. And if I have a lot of greed, I got to practice more generosity and less attachment. If I have a lot of anger and hatred, I have to practice more compassion and more forgiveness. And if I'm sort of self-centered, I need to practice more mindfulness and stay more present and actually notice the other humans and get out of my self-centeredness and be more relational. And so there's balancing qualities that we can bring to our personalities, but we're not going to probably get rid of our personalities. Second fetter, doubt. Now this is interesting. Doubt comes as part of the 5 hindrances and is considered to be the most kind of difficult or debilitating thing for us meditators, because doubt is the thing that will talk you out of meditating. If you self-doubt, if you doubt your own ability, if you doubt the efficacy of the meditation instruction, and if you really believe your mind that's doubting the Dharma, if you start to say like, yeah, I don't think that liberation is actually possible, and you believe that, then you won't keep practicing. Or if you doubt yourself, I don't think I can do this, you won't keep practicing. So it says we break that fetter of doubt. We have full confidence. This shit's working. Slowly, but surely, I'm experiencing a shift in my reality and how I respond and how I relate and how I show up, how I relate to my own self, my own personality. It's changing, and a deep, verified confidence, not a blind faith, not I read it and I believed it, or Noah said it and I believe him. A verified faith from your own direct experience, freedom from doubt, that skeptical, and again, self-centeredness, right? The mind is going to continue to doubt, but we stop believing it. And I think this is important, even though the Buddha is saying this is the stream entry, and that there's still quite a ways to go. If you remember the story of the Buddha's enlightenment, he's attacked by Mara, and he's attacked by lust. And so he's on the verge of arahant, of Buddhahood, almost there, but he's attacked by sensual desire, lust. He's attacked by hatred. The armies of Mara attack. And the last attack is Mara attacking in the form of doubt. But he sees through it, and he touches the earth, and the earth bears witness, or he says, I'm part of this planet, because his mind doubts his own worth right at the verge of awakening. And so he breaks right through it. But those doubts come. But how do we respond when you're in self-doubt, when you're in insecurity, unworthiness? When we believe it, we suffer. When we're mindful of how impersonal doubt is, it's no longer really doubt. It's just a thought arising and passing through. Oh, look at that. The mind is doubting. So I think that that's important. I don't want to set up the expectation that your mind will never have a skeptical thought again. It's just like this identifying with the personality. It's not that your personality is going to go away. It's not that your mind is never going to have some doubt. It's that you're not going to believe it. That when doubt arises, you will know it. Oh, that's doubt. That's just a hindrance. I don't have to get hooked into it, identified with it. Does that make sense? For me, I need this shit to make sense. And I don't want to set up an expectation that you will never have a skeptical thought again, or that doubt will never arise again. And remember, even the enlightened Buddha, Mara kept returning. Craving, aversion, and doubt kept coming back even after he was awake. But he didn't suffer about it because he knew it. Oh, that's just what the mind does. Sometimes it has that doubt. I just don't believe it. Sometimes it has that craving. I just don't obey it. Sometimes it has those aversive thoughts. I just don't take the bait. I don't obey the mind anymore. Lastly, and I like the way that he translates it here, because the way that I've mostly heard this is one is no longer attached to rites and rituals. And they do a little bit more specific, and it's helpful here. He says, the distorted grasp of rules and vows. You know what they're talking about here? They're talking about like when you're so Buddhist that you're annoying, that you have a distorted grasp, and not only on your own path, but really like putting on other people. And you say to them, that's not right speech. And that's not, oh, you drink alcohol, you can't be a Buddhist. That's against the 5th precept. And you have this grasp and this sort of annoying putting it on other people. And I've been so guilty of this. Probably I'm still, probably one of the reasons that I haven't broken through, because I can cling so much to, you know, what's a real Buddhist and what's not. And the kind of, I know that I have this sometimes of, you know, dissing the Tibetan Buddhists or the Zen Buddhists or the Hindu yogis or whatever, and this kind of attachment to Theravadan's the right way, rather than a loose confidence that says, I don't know what the fuck they're talking about, but this makes sense to me, without attachment to it, without a kind of competitiveness or a distorted view of my vows, often in relationship to are better than your vows, my perspective, better than their perspective. Again, that self-centeredness. The distorted grasp of rules and vows. Now, I remember when I heard this first, and I heard it as freedom from attachment to the rites and rituals, I thought like, oh, does that mean that like when you're a stream enterer, you don't meditate anymore because you're no longer attached to the, you know, vows and the rituals of practicing the Dharma? Do they stop? Do they stop practicing the precepts? They're no longer attached to them. But that's why Amaro and Passano are putting this very necessary piece here about a distorted grasp. Because you're still, maybe it's the difference between connection and clinging. Non-attachment is connection. So getting to this place where you're so connected to your path and to your faith and verified experience that you just know I'm going in the right direction, and I have total confidence that mindfulness and concentration and the 5 precepts and livelihood and you know, right speech and understanding, like this 8-fold path, I just feel so connected to it. I feel so confident, but I don't feel attached at all. I'm not clinging to it, but it is just how I'm living. I'm not grasping to it. It's just how I'm living. Now, I'm trying to think of some other examples of so many examples of where if you're too rigid, if you're holding on too tight. For instance, like I'm a motorcycle rider. I've been riding dirt bikes. I hurt myself pretty bad last year, a couple years ago, on riding dirt bikes. But part of riding dirt bikes, and my friend was taking a dirt bike class this weekend, and I was watching her, and part of it is like you got to hold on, but you can't be rigid when you're holding on. You have to have sort of a loose grasp because you're on the dirt and you're going up and down, and so you're connected to the handlebars and you're holding on to them. But if you straighten your arms and you're too rigid, you're going down. So you have to have this sort of loose connection. maybe like today I was surfing with my kids. Same thing, surfing. Like when you catch the wave, if you stand up and you're like rigid about about your posture, you're going down. You have to be loose. You have to bend your knees, and you're not so so rigid that you're falling down, and you're not so loose that you just aren't standing up and balancing on the board. I hope these analogies help a little bit of what we're talking about here, where your relationship to the Dharma, your relationship to the practice isn't rigid and stiff and uptight about, I am a Buddhist and I am on this path. It's relaxed and it's like, yeah, I love this shit. This is great. I have the instructions. I have the, and I also mess it up all of the time, and I forgive myself, and I'm not trying, I don't need to judge myself for every time I don't have right speech, or, being a little bit more relaxed about it with the intention to be skillful with our speech and with our actions, but just a relaxed connection to the Dharma. The Buddha was asked after he was fully liberated, why do you still meditate? Because what I think it makes sense. Because as I started tonight's class, we're meditating for a reason, because we're not free. If you were completely free, you wouldn't, it would seem like you wouldn't have to do all of this hard work that the Dharma is asking us to do. But the Buddha's reply was, yeah, I'm free. But it's become my habit. I did it for so long to get free. And now I just really enjoy it. It's just one of the pleasant, kind of healthy, pleasant things that I do in my life. It's become my habit. And, I still meditate, and I still brush my teeth, and I still, it's just something that I do. It's just good, for the mind. And he said also, towards the end of his life, he had all of these injuries and all of this physical chronic pain. He said also that one of the only time I get freedom from that intense chronic pain is when I get really concentrated. So I still use this practice of the jhanas, because although I have compassion for my pain, it's still really painful to be in pain. And I can get so concentrated where I don't feel the pain anymore. And that's useful. So I still meditate just so that I can at times get a break from this intense physical pain that I live with. So entering the stream, the breakthrough. And I don't know what to make of this. Like if you get to the place where you're free from doubt, you're free from identity view, you're free from clinging to rites and rituals, vows, and that you only have 7 incarnations left. I'm not sure what to make of that. It sounds a little too religious to me. I don't love it, but it is the traditional view. 7 incarnations, that you can't fuck it up. If you really get to that place, nirvana eventually, within 7 incarnations. You will continue to have incarnations that will bring you into contact with the Dharma, where you can continue your work to break the other 7 fetters that are left, because you've only broken 3 of them. And so this is important. You can be a stream enterer and still have lots of, lust and lots of anger, and it doesn't mean you're completely free. But it's the first level of freedom. So some thoughts, and we have about 10 minutes left of class for some discussion. Does it make sense? Where did I lose you? What are the questions about this perspective? If you're at home and you like to raise your hand, you can raise your little blue hand in your box. It's like in the little dots above your picture. You can raise your hand and I'll call on you, or if you're here in the room and you'd like to clarify anything that I've said or discuss it, or please.
You may have touched on this, but once we become unfettered, how would you characterize what's left? I've often wondered why the practice resists the notion of soul. How would you characterize what's left after?
I'll just repeat it for the people at home. I'm not sure if you could hear him. The question was, if we break all 10 of these fetters, if we become free from identity view, free from doubt, free from the distorted grasp of rules and vows, free from sensual desire, ill will, free from lust for form, lust for the formless, lust, conceit, restlessness, and ignorance, if we're free from those 10 fetters, what remains? And then a little comment there, why don't we call that a soul? Was that close enough? So what remains when we, because all of this, those 10 things, like these are the 10 of the ways that we suffer, that we create suffering for ourselves, that the human incarnation, you're born with a tendency towards all 10 of these. And if you practice deeply and you get free, what remains? Loving kindness for all living beings, compassion for all forms of pain, both internal and external, and appreciative joy, this level of when you're free from conceit and self-centeredness and clinging, now not only do you experience your own pleasure, you empathize with everyone else's happiness and pleasure and a sense of equanimity. You know, the Brahma Viharas, loving kindness, compassion, appreciation, equanimity, are what remain when you're free from the fetters. And remember, that first thing that I wrote is like those 300 spears a day for 100 years. And he says, because when you enter the stream, happiness and joy will be your reality. You'll still have pain, but you will have compassion for pain. You'll still have desire, but you will have a wise relationship to. Is it appropriate or inappropriate? It's impermanent, not worth clinging to. So I don't know what remains. I mean, there's maybe a bigger question there. I mean, that's emotionally, it's the positive emotions that remain from this Buddhist perspective. There is the question of like, okay, if nirvana is freedom from samsara and freedom breaking the cycle of rebirth, where does this consciousness, this karmic momentum, when we've freed ourselves, when we've purified the karma and we become an arahant, a non-returner, when we don't come back, where does the energy, what would be called spirit or soul, where does it go? And the Buddha doesn't answer that question, so I can't either. And I'm not, you know, I get the question of like, why don't we just call it a soul? But the Buddha really didn't do that because soul had a connotation of eternal, forever. And maybe it does, right? But maybe by definition, it's forever. And the Buddha is saying, no, your karma is playing itself out. And when you're done with your karma, you're done with rebirth. And nirvana is an experience of neither form nor formlessness, neither consciousness nor a lack of consciousness, neither being nor non-being. And he's just saying it's not lights out, but it's not a continued existence for your soul. It's not heaven. It's freedom. I know that's not a very the mind doesn't love that answer because it doesn't give us somewhere to rest our self. The self wants something a little bit more solid to believe in. Please.
It's kind of similar to his point. I like what you said about the personalities, I think was the word. I kind of saw that as the ego. It's sort of negative, maybe adaptations to trauma or whatever sort of patterns that we picked up over the years, maybe. And I like what you said, because I've heard this in other arenas where this is not you. These are just sort of coping mechanisms that you adapted over the years to that served you maybe at one point. And so my question is that these are sort of like egos, and it's not really you. So who you really are is perhaps like pure. It's undying. It never ends, and it's just sort of like energy, perhaps. But then you said the personality won't change that much, I think you said. Were you referring to like the ego sort of sense, or the true sense of who you are deep down?
Let's see if I can repeat that in a concise way. Just the last part I'm going to repeat, which was when I said the personality, even enlightenment, even awakening doesn't change the personality that much. Was I saying that the kind of conditioned personality from this lifetime, the ego structure from this lifetime, or a bigger sense of true self? Well, from a Buddhist perspective, there's a little bit of a problem with the way that you're asking the question, because this idea of a true self isn't a Buddhist concept. So it's a little hard for me to really give you a Buddhist answer from that perspective. But I was referring to the ego personality, and just, how your mind, in psychology, like human development, says that most of your personality and your attachment style and all of that, by the time you're 5 years old, some developmental psychology says by the time you're 3 years old, your personality is in place. That early, you don't remember any of that shit when you're an infant, but the way that your parents and your environment was, by the time you're 3, like that shit's already in place. And the stuff, the bullies on the playground and all of the other traumas that we experience later have huge effect on us. But that core personality and how we respond to those traumas, it's kind of already in place. Whether we're kind of have a secure attachment or not a secure attachment, or all of that shit, like before you're 5. And that stuff, not going to change that much. How you relate to it, it's going to change a lot. But the fact that your mind craves when you walk into a room, or has aversion when you walk into a room, or feels, you're going to have to live with that stuff. My dad, not that he really knew, but he knew a lot. Anytime us spiritual teachers are talking about enlightenment, we're all kind of full of shit. Because we're not enlightened, so we don't really know. So, but my dad, not an enlightened being, but used to love to say, enlightenment does not perfect the personality, it only perfects the perspective. And so that's part of where I'm taking this perspective from. And then partially I'm saying, like, hey, even the Buddha had to continue to deal with Mara. And, and had his conditioning from, his childhood that he brought into. Somebody pointed out to me once, they said, do you think the Buddha had any, and you can think about this for a moment. Do you think the Buddha had a greed personality type or an aversive personality type?
Probably greed at first, maybe aversive after enlightenment.
Think about it. Now, would a greed personality type start with suffering? There is suffering. No. A greed personality type would have started the Four Noble Truths with the third truth. Nirvana is available in this lifetime, right? Like if I was teaching Buddhism, I'd start with the good news. The Buddha aversive personality type started with, I don't know if this is true or not, but this is a perspective. Let's point out the problem first, right? Aversive personalities, what's wrong here? There's suffering, that's what's wrong. What's the cause? It's craving. Can we get free? Yes, we can get free. So I'm not sure, I don't want to, make a big argument that that's true, but it might be true that he had an aversive personality type and that he taught Buddhism based on that personality tendency. Let's look at what's wrong and if we can solve it or not. Now there's a whole nother discussion here about it's a medical model. What are the symptoms? Is there a cure? But maybe he was aversive. Okay, that's enough for tonight. Thank you all at home for tuning in. Thank you all for being in the room and joining me. Against the Stream is supported by the generosity of the people who attend both in person and online. We are in a financially difficult time for everyone, and our center and our nonprofits in a financially difficult time, struggling to make rent. Also, I do need to be supported as a meditation teacher, and I haven't been able to be paid for any of the teaching for quite a while because all the money is just going into paying the rent on the room, which is maybe another issue that I need to look at. But the hope here is that there'll be enough generosity to pay the rent and also to support me. Ideally, half of the donations would go to pay the rent at Against the Stream, and the other half of the donations would come to me to support me in my livelihood. The reality is it all goes to Against the Stream and has been all the last year or so, just so that we can pay the rent. So please be as generous as you can, and know that everyone is welcome. The suggested donation is $15 or $20 every time you come, whether you're tuning in online or you're coming in person. And if you can make a $15 or $20 donation every time, great, that'll help so much. And if you're in a place where you don't have that kind of money to donate, know that you're always welcome, regardless of ability, to pay or to donate. And many of our community members become monthly supporters, saying like, I want to give this much money every month, whether or not I'm attending. Not just a sort of, it's one of the radical things about this sort of donation culture is that it's not fee for service. This isn't about, I liked your talk, so I'm giving you money. This is about, I want to support the Dharma. I want to make sure that this center continues, that this community is supported, not paying for what you received, but just a general generosity in support of the Dharma being available in this form. So please be generous if you can. I saw that Rachel put the link in the chat here on Zoom for you to donate. And thanks, everybody. May any goodness that comes from our practice and discussion of the Buddha's Dharma be shared with all beings everywhere. May we all enter the stream, and together may we create a positive change on this planet.